Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Becoming an Author and Sharing Your Journey webinar. I'm Destiny, the media strategist for Seeds of Healing. Seeds of Healing is an HIV awareness and advocacy organization whose mission is to deconstruct myths that perpetuate HIV stigma. Our work seeks to eliminate disparities for Black women living with HIV. This webinar will be recorded and shared to our SOH Time platform and posted to our YouTube channel. Attendees are able to drop questions in the chat box and they will be shared at the end of the webinar. Please feel free to ask questions and write comments throughout the program. There will be a short survey at the end of the webinar, which includes contact information for a Kindle copy of both books by our panelists today as a gift for participating. So a quick introduction to SOH Time, as today's webinar is a SOH Time event. SOH Time is a virtual platform for Black women living positively. Here is a short video about the platform.
Hey ladies, welcome to SOH Time. My name is Benita Spradley, one of the moderators and content contributors here, and we're excited to have you aboard.
Hello, Queens, and welcome to SOH Time. I'm Tamisha Isaac, also one of your moderators and content contributors. I'm honored to have you join us.
SOH Time is a platform for Black women to connect across the U.S. to provide tools for self-care and encourage consistent adherence.
SOH Time is a platform for us, created by us, to collaborate and center issues that affects Black women, the struggle causes by a diagnosis or chronic illness.
We have groups with specific topics to cater to the mission of SOH Time, but uplift, empower, and strengthen you as we power through on this journey.
Surrounding yourself with women that look like you in a safe space where you are free to be yourself while learning from each other and sharing resources that can enhance your way of life on the course of this journey.
We are here for each one of you. We welcome you, and we look forward to networking, supporting one another, and learning new things as we come together on this SOH Time website.
Welcome.
So a quick introduction to our panelists today. We have Alicia Diggs, who is the CEO and founder of I Will Live. Alicia became an HIV/AIDS activist, educator, and speaker in 2004. Her goal is to help the community understand the importance of STD/STI prevention, advocating against stigma and discrimination, knowing your HIV status by getting tested, as well as living healthy and productive lives through empowerment and education. Alicia has spoken for various organizations who provide services for persons living with HIV in North Carolina. We have Lynette Trawick, which is the founder and executive director of IMU. Through IMU, Lynette guides and encourages women to live their lives beyond their HIV diagnosis. She also creates unique platforms to support serodiscordant couples and children of parents who have been diagnosed with HIV. Lynette educates through workshops, presentations, skits, and other creative methods. She has facilitated and co-facilitated workshops on topics varying from HIV/AIDS, healthy relationships, abstinence, and others to a variety of audiences, both faith-based and non-faith-based. And we have Ashley Daniels, who is a Southeastern North Carolina native with a background as a community organizer in environmental justice, social justice, and grassroots electoral politics. She's the owner of Speak Life Consulting and works part-time at the LGBTQ Center of the Cape Fear Coast as the operations and programming assistant. Without further ado, I will now turn it over to our panel.
Thank you, Destiny, for introducing us. Again, my name is Ashley Daniels, and I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening, and just express how excited I am to be a part of this panel and have the opportunity to facilitate. Before we begin, I do want to lift up two things that Destiny mentioned. First, there will be the opportunity to answer questions at the end, to ask questions and have questions answered at the last 20 minutes. So please do feel free to drop questions in the chat box if things come up. And the second thing is, as Destiny mentioned, there will be a brief survey, and we will also share that at the beginning of the Q&A session. That'll ask you some things about, how this experience of the webinar was for you, as well as what other content that you would like to see on this platform. It'll also ask you some demographic information about like your age and race. And this information is private. We respect your privacy. We only use this information to understand which demographics we're serving and to be able to communicate which populations we're caring for and giving information to. With that being said, I want to begin the panel. I want to welcome Ms. Alicia and Lynette and just express what a pleasure it was for me to read both of your books. I laughed out loud and had moments of feeling like full of joy and then teared up at several moments. So just felt very blessed and very honored to be here. The first question that I want to ask is, what prompted you to write your book, or who prompted you? And since you're already off mute, Lynette, we can start with you.
What prompted me to write my book started out with me journaling, just writing down some experiences, just trying to get some stuff off my chest and out of my head. It was a form of therapy for me. And eventually, as stories started coming out, as I started like kind of going back and reading these stories, and I started sharing things with people, and they said, you need to go ahead and write a book. And, that's what I said. Okay, well, I decided to go ahead and write the book. But it wasn't an overnight thing. I got excited when someone told me that, I saw, what did I see? It was a post on social media and it said, write your book in 30 days. So I said, yes, that is for me. Let me sign up right now. In 30 days, here I am 7 years later. But yes, so it took some years, but it's here and I'm excited.
So I started with journaling and dedication over 7 years. Glad that you stuck with it. We'll ask you the same thing, Alicia. What or who prompted you to write your book?
Well, that's funny that Lynette said that, because that is really the same thing for me. It was journaling. I had been writing since I was little anyway. That's just what I did. It was easy for me to write a story. I was very imaginative, but as an adult, when life happens, those things tend to get pushed in the back burner of your life, and you think that you forget how to write. And I would hear like, oh, you have a story you should write. And, when I got on the platform to start telling my story out loud, I recall speaking at Bennett University here in North Carolina, and a lady pulled me out of the audience, and she was with a publishing company. And she said, you have a story in you? And I said, I do. And she said, right. And I said, about what? And I said, everybody has a story. And I said, I don't even know where to start. She said, just write. So just like Lynette said, journaling. So even the beginning of my book literally may even have some dates. And I took all of my journals and put it in a book because I wrote everything. And sometimes there were parts that I would like start in a story, and then I would skip to another day because I was journaling. So literally I'll tell people, they're like, well, how do I start journaling? So yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. So I hear you both saying you started with journaling, and you had to have like some dedication to stay with it because it didn't happen within 30 days. But was there like a specific process as far as editing, as far as reviewing? What was your process like? And Alicia, we can start with you.
Well, yes, it took years. So mine, I'll be honest with you, I thought when somebody said, write your story, as a woman living with HIV, I was like, okay, I want to write my story about my journey living with HIV. And it's all of these people that have a story. What makes mine so different? So when I would start to write my story, and I'm saying it that way, like if it was written down, it would be italicized story. I tried to write it. And then when I would get what I consider to the hard part of it is when I got the diagnosis, I would stop. So it took me 10 years to write my book. And also when I stopped at that part, one day I opened it up maybe a few years later, and God told me to start from the beginning. And I was like, well, what do you mean the beginning?
And I didn't understand what that meant. And then the beginning was the beginning of what I remember as a person. So my story literally started from the beginning of my time being alive. And, you know, during that journey of this writing this thing, I realized that I'm bigger than HIV. My life is bigger than HIV. And though it is centered around healing and the journey of the life as a person living with HIV, there's so many more branches on this tree. So yeah, I'll just kind of stop right there. Yeah.
I just want to appreciate that point, because I think right away reading the first chapter or so of your book, when you're talking about like you playing with your brother, kind of rough, like roughhousing your brother, and like y'all sharing your candy, and like you did have a candy store. I just felt so much joy in your story, and it gave me such an insight of how you were able to get through some of the rough times. It just seemed like you had this inherent joy. So I'm thankful that you did start your story from the very beginning.
Thank you.
Lynette, I'll ask you the same question. What was the process like for you?
Yeah, so very similar. It took, like I said, to go back. It's funny because for years I've been saying it took me 5 years to write my book. It took me 5 years to write my book. I think 2 months ago, I was scrolling, and you know, on Facebook, it gives you like your memories on this day or whatever. And I looked and I said, it was a post, something about I'm writing, and it was a picture of my hand in the book writing. And I said, that was 7 years ago, not 5. So it was a very similar process. I would start writing and I would get some things out. And once I got to the part, you know, I stopped. And there were several parts that stopped me through the process. You know, there were several traumas that I had put out of my mind that reemerged while I was writing the book. There were several things that I had to stop and go back to therapy. Like, okay, let me process through this part first. Then I can get back to writing. There were times where I had to call people and apologize for how I hurt them. You know, like I said, stories that just came out. And I even had people through that time that would call me out of the blue to start telling me stories about how I hurt them. You know, so it's definitely been a tough but very rewarding journey. And then the editing process, I had no idea all that writing a book entailed. You know, when I heard write your story, it was okay, I know how to write. Let me just go ahead and write the book. And when I was finished with what I thought was the book, then it was like, okay, now what? Who do I call? How do I get this in a book? Where do I put it? Who buys it? What is that whole process? What does the cover look like? It was so many different aspects of writing the book that I never thought would happen. I just, you know, you hear write a book, so you just write a book. It's contact this editor, and then you have, you know, and then even with that partnership, that was a whole different level of things. But yeah, like I think the biggest thing that Miss Alicia said was just write. Don't overthink it. You just write.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing up the point about you think that writing a book is this one thing, right? Like, I've got paper, I have a pen, I can do this thing. And then it's like, there's so much emotional things that come up when you're telling your personal story. And then it's like, then there's a business side of it. So I appreciate you bringing that part of it.
Before you ask the next question, I do want to add to what Lynette said. It's so funny, Lynette, I literally feel like we were sisters writing, because everything that you're saying is tying into how it was for me. It was a complete healing, which is another reason why my book is called Standing on My Healing. Not to mention my mentor gave me that part, but Standing on My Healing, my book was literally written by hand. So, and then I had to then convert it. So the cover of my book is the actual book that I wrote my book in. So I still have that. And it was actually a, what do you call it? When people draw. So it was one of those books, and I have it in plastic and it's just in a drawer, but it was a healing process. It wasn't just write your story and tell your story because you want your business out in the street or you want people to know your truth. It was personal healing for me. Writing the book wasn't about making money off of it. It was my healing. It was my life. It was so serious. It was like, if I did not finish writing this book, I was going to continue to stay in whatever state I was in when I first started writing that book. So as I wrote, it was a complete peeling of the onion, if you will. And like Lynette, I was going through different traumas, and that's why it took 10 years, because I was hit every time I wrote a chapter. I was having to relive something, and there was so much that I had to keep out for so many reasons, and then having to go talk to somebody about it, and then just having to get all my life together as I wrote this book. So yeah, it was a whole process. Yeah.
Thank you both. The next question, Lynette, I'll ask you to start. What are your thoughts since completing the book? And is there anything that you feel you would have done differently?
Yeah, I do feel like there was one major thing I would have done differently. So the aspect of my book, so my book is titled From Diagnosis to Destiny. So it literally highlights the portion of my life right before I was diagnosed with HIV, things that kind of led up to that. And then everything that took place after that diagnosis. So everything from dating to, children, to so many different aspects after my diagnosis. But the one thing that surprises people is my husband never read my book before it was released. So I wrote my entire book. I went through the whole editing, publishing, everything. And he was like, no, he kept telling people, no, I never read it. No, she never showed me. And it wasn't necessarily a fear, but it was just, I wanted to protect him from my story, from aspects of my story that he didn't really know. And I wasn't really ready to tell him, but I knew it would just be easier for me to say, okay, here's the book, it's done, read it. And then we'll talk about it afterward, because it was just really tough. So I think the one thing, like I said, that I would change would just be to discuss some things about it with him, give him some insight about a lot of things that was going on, even through my process of writing, because my writing process was very private. I kept, I wrote after everyone went to bed. I edited after everyone went to bed. My process was, I was very by myself in my process. So I would definitely let some close people into that process for some support.
Yeah, it sounds like you are kind of shepherding your own initiation in some ways with writing the book. I see in the chat box there's a question of a second book, so maybe that's something you can do differently with the second book.
Oh yeah.
I'll ask you the same question, Alicia. Now that your book is out, how do you feel about it? And is there anything that you feel like you would do differently?
There's honestly a lot I would do different. I feel absolutely great about my book. It's my baby. It was a birthing process. What I would do differently is, what I did differently than what you did, Lynette, was I was sharing with a lot of people, and I asked permission. I asked permission because I needed to be my authentic self, because I was hurt a lot. I received more hurting than I hurt people. So I didn't have to ask for a lot of forgiveness in the things that I wrote. And I had to walk on eggshells in my book, and I didn't like that. I didn't like that I couldn't truly be my true self. Like, what people who have read my book and they're like, wow, like you got a half a wow. I'm gonna be real honest. And you got a half a wow because I wanted to be respectful to people. And the hardest part was just things that I regret was just not doing enough research, because I didn't have a lot of knowledge about writing a book, and I'm a very, very huge overthinker. And I didn't have a lot of information. And what I did get, when I finally did get the opportunity to get it out, I got a lot of incorrect information, and it caused some hurt for me. But at the same time, it taught me of what to do for the next time. So I literally have probably about 3 books, probably 4 inside of me that I just haven't made the time to get out. But I'm proud of this process. It's a wonderful process. It feels good. It really feels good. It makes you feel, you know, like you grew up. Like if you remember when you turned legal, it's like, oh, I'm 21 now, you know, I'm real legal, not 18, because I feel like teen, you still teen, 21, like you're straight up legal. Like it really felt so good and I felt accomplished. I just really, really felt accomplished. And now I feel like this next time I can most certainly get real deep down and dirty and writing a book. And I don't have to worry about pages, because that's another thing. I was so concerned about, it's not enough pages. Is that too much? You know, maybe I didn't put enough in there. Oh, did I put enough resources in it? It's not even about any of that. It's not an encyclopedia. If you want it to be, then you create an encyclopedia style writing. But if you're completely trying to share your heart, share your story, or go through your healing process, do that. So that's something I would just do differently.
Yeah, thank you both for that.
Mm-hmm.
The next question, Alicia, I'll start with you.
Mm-hmm.
For folks who are considering sharing their story and they're wanting to write their story about living positively, what tips or what advice would you share for those folks who are listening?
First thing I would tell people is take a deep breath. Take a deep breath, just breathe. Because, and that sounds so simple, but it's real, because you're holding your breath and you're trying to dance around everything because you're trying to protect other people. You don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to do the wrong thing, but it is about you. It is your space. It is only about you. Nobody else matters. Nobody else matters. And that's not being selfish. That's just being real. But number one, take a deep breath. In all of your writings, whatever you have already, don't overthink it, because you want to write a book, especially if it's about your journey. You already wrote about that. You spoke about that. You have several writings. Go back to some of the things that you've already written about and put all of those things together. Don't worry about what's the name of the chapter. Don't worry about if it's all over the place. Just first put it down and then read through it, and then get somebody that you know and you trust and have them read through it with you. And then, to be honest with you, whoever your spiritual connection is, for me, I'm just going to say God is my connection. God will guide you to what needs to go down on that page, what chapter needs to be what chapter, what needs to be titled what. But in everything, just take a breath. And when you feel overwhelmed, it's okay to step back. It's completely okay. Lynette said it took her like 7 years. It took me like 10. And it may take Lynette 30 days next time. And it may take me 30 days next time. It may take us both like a whole week. We may come together and just do a whole anthology, because that's a part of my heart, you know, when it comes to people living with HIV. But really, truly, just take your time and don't overthink it.
I love how you speak in life in the 30 days and the week duration for writing. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Lynette, I'll ask you the same thing. If there were a tip, like a set of tips or any kind of suggestions that you would have for people who are considering writing their story about living positively, what would you tell them?
Outside of everything that Miss Alicia said, just write. Don't overthink the process. And even going back to earlier when we were talking about journaling, I remember having the dates on top of my pages, and I went back at the end and I would literally delete the date and replace it with the name of a chapter. I would delete a date, name it, and the chapter names were coming to me like this at the end, you know, because I was following God's direction. Okay, what's this chapter? Here's the title. Okay, what's this chapter? Here's the title. And it came so simple. I didn't think about it in the beginning. I didn't think about sentence structure or where does a comma go or what needs to be capitalized. I literally just poured everything out into the book. Another aspect of it is I did not focus on, okay, I'm going to restart that. I was focusing in the beginning on what people were going to think, or how people were going to feel when they read my story, especially because I knew that people who were impacted by my journey were in my book, whether negatively or positively. So I thought about that a little in the beginning, but then after a while, it was like, this is my story. If you've caused me harm in my journey and it's written down in my book, all I can do is change your name. But if you read it and you feel attacked, I can't do anything about that. It wasn't my choice to have you hurt me. So write it, get it out. That's one suggestion that I can give is, if you feel the need to, for protection of people, change your name. Throw an extra little sentence in there somewhere to kind of throw things off a little bit. If the person was 5'2", say they were 6'2", change something up if you want to protect people further, but get the story out, because it is about your healing. It is about your journey. And you're not going to feel fully complete if you don't get the full story out, because like Alicia said earlier, it's like you got a half wow, you could have impacted somebody else just a little more. And I read parts of my book too right now where I'm like, I should have said that, but it's okay, because it'll be in the next one or the next one or the next one, but just go ahead and get the story out. Don't worry about, because first of all, when you're journaling, that's your private journey. So nobody's reading that part anyway. You can decide later on what you're going to put in, what you're going to take out.
And I also want to add, as you're writing, when you get to a point that you have somebody editing whatever you write, if whatever you wrote it in Ebonics and that's the way you want it to be, don't let an editor change that. And they say, well, that's incorrect English. That's how you spoke it at that moment. So if whatever it is, I'm not going to make an example, but whatever it was and it wasn't correct English, and that's what you said in that moment, and that's how you wanted people to know this. If you wanted people to get a picture of that moment, leave that moment. Don't let people change anything that you want in your book, because it's yours. And if they have some suggestions, then you can take those and do whatever you want to do with it. But if your heart is to have whatever you want in that book, on those pages, you make sure that you have what you want. Treat it as your baby. Treat it as your baby. For me, it was my baby, and I had already had children, but I was literally carrying a baby that was kicking and screaming to get up out of me. And I needed it to come out the way that I wanted it to come out. And I wanted to come out with both legs and both arms. So that's just a suggestion right there. Don't let people change your words.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I remember as writing my book. So I'm from Philadelphia. I'm from Philly. So, yes. So, Philly slang, everywhere has their own slang. So Philly slang, I had mentioned some things, but my editor isn't from Philly. So she was like, well, did you mean ice water? Like, no, I meant water ice. I'm not going to break it down and say Italian ice or anything. You don't know what it means. Right. Somebody going to have to go do some research on what water ice is, right. So just different things like that. So I love that. That's definitely true.
That is golden. Thank you so much for saying that, and both of you for lifting that up, because there is intelligence and worth in gold in African American vernacular, and it is no less worthy than whatever we see in Webster's dictionary and whatever is considered proper. Right. That's what our folks loved us with. That's what our people knew us with. So thank you for lifting that up, and thank you both for also. I want to lift up something you said about basically like owning your story and having the ability to say, like, this is the story, and people might feel a type of way about it, but it's mine. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that women, especially Black women, often get discouraged from doing, wanting to care for people's feelings. So thank you for that point. The next question I will ask, Lynette, I'll start with you. Do you have a favorite chapter or a chapter that you feared most writing?
I don't really have I don't know, I have a few favorite chapters, but the one, I had two that I kind of struggled writing. And one was hurt people, and the other was I hate to say I told you so. The reason I struggled with those two was going back to what I said earlier. Hurt people was talking about a lot of ways that I hurt other people as a result of a lot of trauma that I experienced. So I addressed those issues and those situations, a lot of those situations where I literally was hurting people in the way that I was hurt, as a way, I guess as a way of healing, as a way of making me feel better, whatever the case was. So that was really tough to write. And that was one of the chapters, although it's one of my shortest chapters, it took me the longest to write that chapter. Because I had a lot of things coming back to me. I had people, it was just so weird because it may have been parts in my book or parts that I wasn't even planning to put in my book that may not even be in my book, but someone would call me and say, "Hey girl, how you been? You remember that time you did such and such?" I was like, "Well, where in the world you come from with this? I ain't talked to you in 10 years, But it was me having to go through that process of, okay, what is it that you're now going to do with this? How can you overcome this? Is it going to be in your book? Is it not going to be in your book? Is it just something that you just have to address within yourself in the moment? And then the other one, I hate to say I told you so, that's still a real sensitive topic, even when I go back and read it now. It was tough to write about because it's something that I'm still processing. I was actually a victim, and I was never the person who committed the crime. The people who committed the crime were never convicted for the crime. So, it's something that was really, really hard to write through. And that was actually one of the chapters, because I deal with that so personally, I had never discussed with my husband. So, once he read it, he came to me and said, "Well, when did this happen? And why didn't you talk to me about this?" And it's like, I'm still processing through it, even now, even though it's already in the book, I'm still processing through that. So those were the two toughest chapters to write for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those with us. Alicia, I'll ask you the same thing. Did you have a favorite chapter or a chapter that you most feared writing?
I feared a few of my chapters, and I had some wonderful favorites. When I think about, some of my favorites, of course, the beginning, when I talk about my big brother, those are always my favorite because he was my very best friend. Goodness. And I know I have to say, that I call it release. It's not about you. When I was questioning my path as a advocate or telling my story, and I was questioning God, like, hold up, what you mean tell what to who? And the question was like, how can I, with everybody else having stories and having things in their life, who am I to be telling a story thinking I can change somebody's life for the better? And those are I just felt like I just wasn't good enough to be that person to stand up and say, "Hey, this happened to me, and let me see, let me talk to you to help you change your life for the better." And just all that to say, was told it's not about me. And that was huge. That was huge to spiritually hear, it's not about you. And even though this thing happened, it is so not about you. There are so many other people who need to hear your story. You may think it's small, but it's huge to somebody else. You may feel like, okay, you got through it, but it's helping somebody else. So that right there was very, very huge to me. So that was my chapter 25. And, then when I go back and I'm looking at, my reflection for making adult decisions. And, right now we're in a time where we're talking about, bodily autonomy and things like that. And, I was 14 and making adult decisions to keep a baby and not to keep a baby and not knowing what to do. And that was hard, having to relive that. And, even as a 50-year young woman now, can still hear and still have the smell in my nose and things like that. And while I don't get emotional anymore because I'm healed and, delivered from that, that was hard. And it was like, oh my gosh, you did that and you didn't have anybody to help you because other people didn't know, and those who did, they didn't know what to do. So reliving that and even writing that was extremely difficult. And, the older man, that particular chapter was extremely hard because I had to sugarcoat that chapter a whole lot. I had to really sugarcoat that chapter a lot because I didn't want to hurt people. And sorry. Even the little bit that I wrote, I still hurt people.
Yeah.
Trying to get my own healing. Other people got hurt. And I had to sit back and say, well, daggone, I was trying to get my healing. How you gonna be hurt? Because that's my truth.
Yeah.
Because that's my truth. It's mine. And I deserve to feel better about the trauma that was trying to literally take my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not fair that other people get hurt by something that you were put through. So that's why I say, I don't apologize for my tears because they're cleansing. That's why I tell you all, don't let people write your story. If you have to ask for permission, because I ask people for permission, the names that are in my story are all true names. I asked them for their permission and they said, absolutely. This person isn't on here, my daughter's father. He was like, excuse me, y'all. Hell yeah, I did that crap to you. I was horrible. Put that in there. Put that in there. I lost out. I jacked your life up. Put that in there. And y'all, that made me feel good because I was like, how do I get my healing and write about being free if I'm not allowed to?
Mm-hmm.
So it makes no sense to even write my story if I can't. So all that to say, I didn't even realize I was going to get emotional about that, but just knowing that I could not completely be my authentic self. And I really, really want to, but in some things, it's not my place to do that. And because I'm not a malicious person and I love real hard, I don't ever want anybody to hurt. And I don't want to be the cause of somebody hurting. So I'd rather sometime going ahead and bite the bullet and just change things around. So in my next story, which may not even be real, because I am, and I know I'm going off on a tangent, we don't have much time, but I'm just giving some tidbits. Like
you got time.
Change some names and stuff. I like to think up a lot of things. I'm an analogy person. So I know one day, y'all, I'm gonna write this book and it won't even be real and y'all won't even be able to tell if it's real, but I'm gonna get my DAMN healing all the way. If it gotta be a cartoon character, I'm gonna get it all. But I'm sorry, y'all, I just had to go on ahead and bring all of that out. But yeah, thank you.
I love that. I love it. And this is the part of writing a book. That's why I said it's not just about putting some words on a paper. There's so much more behind it. There's so much more to still heal from. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that. I appreciate your transparency. That was awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. The next question, I have lost track of my order, but I think that the order was, Lynette, if you could do this question first. Would you read an excerpt with us? And would you share with us why you chose that excerpt?
Yes. So this excerpt is from the chapter called Turn Up. And I'll just start off by saying this is one of my favorite chapters because this portion actually that I'm going to read, I chose this portion because this was one of the turning points after my diagnosis. I feel that God used this moment to help me begin to start being transparent and tell my story. Sometimes we look back and we're like, God, why would you do that? Why would you allow that? But I can look back in hindsight and see that this was a way that he used these people in my life to help me to become who I am today. When I answered my phone, I heard a familiar voice with an unfamiliar tone. He was panicked, angry, and yelling. Yo, I heard you got AIDS. You burning? I froze. I felt like my heart had jumped into my mouth. I could have sworn I felt it beating against my cheeks as I silently prayed for some sort of sound to escape. Anything but the deafening silence that we were both listening to on the phone line. Hello? He yelled. I thought that my almost inaudible response would buy me more time to get my answer together. Huh? I said, don't harm me. You heard me. Are you burning? In the seconds it took for me to find my voice, I must have also become an award-winning actress. My response of, what? Who said that? Was convincing. At least enough that he relaxed a bit and told me about a Facebook page that someone created called Chicks Burning in Philly. Despite the cool temperature outside, my face got hot. I could not stop shaking. I wanted to cry, scream, hide, something to relieve the pain and anger I was feeling. Why would someone decide to tell my secret before I was ready? Who would do something like this to me? I had never done anything mean to anyone. Well, at least not intentionally. Who was I kidding? The reality was I was more upset that I was forced to face reality. I was not ready to admit to myself that I had HIV, let alone admit it to anyone else. And I definitely wasn't ready to admit to a sexual partner that yes, it was true. And yes, I knew it before you took me back to your place and took off my clothes. After a few more minutes of calming him down, I hung up and rushed home. I made a beeline to the worn out computer chair in front of my desktop computer. I quickly moved the mouse from side to side until the monitor came to life. I logged into Facebook and very hesitantly typed Chicks Burning in Philly into the search box. I was instantly nauseous. At the top of the page was a picture that I was previously proud of. I was showing off in my fitted flower dress and matching 5-inch stilettos, holding whatever my drink was at the moment. I appeared carefree. Under that picture that I used to be so hyped to show off, the caption read, Lynette has AIDS. So that's from the chapter, Turn Up.
Yeah.
And that was, I remember after that, trying to come up with creative ways to tell the world that Lynette does not have AIDS, HIV, none of that. I remember having a conversation with people like, okay, listen, you go get tested and then give me the test and I'm going to do something with the computer and put my name, like I just wanted to completely disappear and be somebody else. But that's kind of one of the times where I was forced to face reality and okay, what now? You know?
Yeah, I remember reading that passage and really feeling for you. Like I could feel like heat in my body over like what that must feel like to sit in a computer and discover that.
And
I think that
imagine then too, we didn't have Facebook mobile. So I'm downtown and getting this news. So now I have to hurry up and get home. I'm catching a train to try to get to my desktop computer to see what people are talking about. But all of these things are swirling around in my head and I'm getting phone calls this entire time and I can't even see what these people are talking about. So yeah.
Yeah. I think the thing that stood out for me after I read that passage though was just how strong you are. Because I remember I think it was not long after that, you were talking about like a race or a walk that you were a part of. And then there was a reporter who came up to you and you just started sharing your story. And then you're like, all right, I've said it. Let me just share this with all the people. And I think that like so many times throughout your book, I just saw such vulnerability and feeling and such love and such core strength. So thank you for sharing that passage with us.
Thank you.
Ms. Alicia, I will ask you the same if you would read us an excerpt and share why you chose this one.
All right, so I am going to do reflection 25, release. It's not about you. Whew. All right. So as a parent, you have to make a decision on when it's time to talk to your children about sexual education or any serious subject for that matter. As it pertained to me telling my children about my diagnosis, there was never a good time. I just had to do it. The best way for me before I told them was to allow them to watch videos on the basics of HIV/AIDS. Then we would do role plays about being pressured into sex. I allowed them to ask as many questions as they wanted. And if I did not have the answer immediately, then I would look it up for them. I really wanted my children to understand the importance of protecting themselves and how to protect themselves. I just wanted to protect my children, and I hate this happened, and I was subjecting them to more hurt. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I decided to sit my children down to tell them. As soon as I had them sit down, my daughter said, "Mommy, I'm scared. Are you going to tell us bad news? Are you sick?" My eyes started to water. So I took a deep breath, and to hold back the tears, then I said, "Well, I have HIV." My son turned red. His eyes poured with tears, and my daughter, through her tears, shouted, "How? When?" "I know how, but who did it? You don't even have a boyfriend. You work all the time. You go to school." I proceeded to tell them where I contracted it. My babies broke down with tears and anger. It was harder telling them and seeing them cry than it was to get the diagnosis. I was so terrified after telling them, but instead of rejection I thought they would have towards me, they both hugged me and reassured me it would be all right. I do not know how long we cried together, but I do know that the three of us became closer. I told them that I was healthy, and despite the diagnosis, I would live a very long time. As a parent, I had to be strong for my children because they were dependent on me for care. They were depending on me to care for them and to live. After telling my children about the diagnosis, I was then free to tell other family members and friends. It really did not matter what people said or how they feel about your life decisions or circumstances, but it is important for me to tell my babies. Besides God, they are my lifeline. By law, at this time, a person living with HIV is only required to tell their partners their status. Anyone else who knows are privileged to get that personal and transparent part of your life. You make the decision as to who and when you are ready to reveal that information to. No one can put a timeline on when or if you reveal that status. I'm gonna skip a little bit because this next paragraph is what really is the reason why I went here. By the end of 2004, I forgave my ex-husband, and that was the start of a new me. I went to a spiritual encounter, and some of the ladies from the church for the weekend and during the final night of the encounter, all of the attendees were given a 6-inch nail with red paint on the end, which was a symbolization of the nails that Jesus was pierced with. Once receiving the nail, we walked up to the wooden cross and banged the nail in the cross as a symbolization of casting all of our cares, past hurts, bondages on the cross. Honestly, when I did that, I felt free from the abusive stepdad, the rape I experienced, the abortion I had, and any hurts I inflicted on people, depression, sadness, and the list goes on. I was totally healed from the hate and nothingness about myself that I once felt. God gave me the strength to forgive and heal me in the process. And for that, I continue to stand on my healing. One day, it really hit me that this situation, or better yet, this new life that I was living, was not even about me, but to help those on the same path. What can I do to help others who are already living with a diagnosis to live a happy, healthy, and fulfilling life? I prayed about those questions that I had, and God told me clearly to tell my story, but this was not the answer that I was looking for. Volunteering was not a problem, but to stand in front of an audience telling them all of my traumatic experiences and allowing myself to be transparent and vulnerable, no. Transparency and vulnerability got me where I am. Come on, God, really? I pondered what I heard in the spirit, hoping that I would get something else, but I always heard, tell your story. Everyone has a story. What makes me so different, so special, so unique? That is when God confirmed what I had in my spirit before. It's not about me. And then I will share this last passage, just sharing that, I spoke at, my first speaking engagement was A&T State University, and my mentor, who I call Mama D, she was our protector during that time. Mama D set the tone, providing the basis of HIV/AIDS, and even requested respect toward us on the panel as we stood nervously yet boldly in front of the class. Before I even connected with anyone to do speaking engagements, I used to have dreams of God showing me that I would be speaking in front of hundreds of people, even someday writing a book. Well, of course, I told God he was tripping, and there was no way that me, of all people, would be writing anything but a school paper, let alone speaking in front of anyone. I must say, never underestimate the power of God and the gifts that he has created in you. You can only run so far and for so long. And I kind of skipped through because it was a lot, but that chapter meant a lot to me because that was one of the last parts that I wrote. And I realized that I was releasing all of the things that I had heavy on my shoulder. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both. I think as a people, as like a generation, we often like romanticize a butterfly, and we hardly ever have a genuine appreciation for the process that it takes to become that butterfly. And I think that like throughout your books, and especially throughout the passages that you just read, it's a very felt sense of that process. So thank you. The next question is a bit of a pivot. And Alicia, I will ask you first. Is getting a publishing company expensive? And what do you look for when you choose a publishing company?
I'm gonna be real transparent in this space. I had no idea what to look for. I had no idea what to do. I knew that I was telling people I was writing, and like Lynette mentioned earlier, getting the Facebook, reminders about writing. I even had a photo shoot with me writing and all of that. And, I would see people who I had told I was writing a book, and they had written their book after I had started and got it out. And I'm like, what's going on? So just making a long story short, it came to me. So a publishing company came to me, and that's how it started in the beginning for me. In my situation, this group was not the right group for me. I'm an analogy person. I will say that again. You cannot leave your baby with everyone. They will not take care of your baby the way that you will. Some people will even abuse your baby. And my baby got abused, and I got abused. And that it was a learning experience, and it was a hard learning experience. There are some fantabulous publishers out there. Do your research. I learned the hard way, and thankfully I have a great following, and I have some great friends, and there were someone who reconnected with me and guided me to finishing the publishing of my book on my own, so that the from Tainted was taken out and the chosen part was able to be birthed. So from my experience, it was not a very good one in the beginning, but what I did learn and what I will share with everybody else who has not written and has a desire, do your research. If you know people who are already authors of multiple books, find out from them what their process were. What I have learned is a lot of people I'm connected to who are authors, they self-publish. My next books will be self-published. Now I know how to do it. It used to be through CreateSpace, and CreateSpace has now since changed to KDP, which is through Amazon. So I am an author through them, and they help me do everything. The first set of my books came out and the font of my book was so small that you needed a daggone microscope to see it. And I'm like, well, what happened? And like, you have to change the font. And then with all the negative stuff that I went through with my first process of people who did not work from my situation, I had to fix things on my own. So now that I know how to do it, I will do it on my own. But I will say that with publishers, they are extremely helpful, but make sure that the publisher is for you. Make sure that they have your best interests at heart. Make sure that they understand that they work for you and not you work for them. Make sure that they're not in it to gain monies off of you, but your royalties will be yours and not theirs. Also, make sure that you do your research when it comes to editing. The publisher, depending on the publishing company that you go through, they may have a complete package deal. Well, they will do your advertising, they will get your editing, they will do, everything that it takes to get your book out to become that #1 bestseller, so that it's not just on Amazon, but they can go into somebody can go into a bookstore and get it. But I will just say, make sure that you do all of your research and reach out to your peers who have already been down this path multiple times now, because this is the first book that I've done on my own. I am an author in other books with a group of people. So I think I'm an author in maybe 3 other books. And that process was a lot easier because it was a group of people. They already had the publishers in place, and it was very, very smooth. But the main thing is do your history, your research, do your due diligence, and make sure that whomever you're working with has your best interests at heart, and you are the boss, not them.
Thank you. Excellent advice. Lynette, I will ask you the same thing. Was getting a publishing company expensive, and what did you look for when you were choosing a publishing company?
So yes, everything Alicia said. But for me, finding a publisher was expensive only because I went through a couple until I found the one that I settled with. I was so excited in the beginning, when I was done writing, I was so excited and I just was ready to just get it published. And the first person that somebody recommended, I said, okay, great. How much? Tell me how much to send you. And I sent them the money. All right, let's get this published. And we didn't mesh at all. Then the next person, okay, what's the process? What do I need to do? And she's like, okay, all you got to do is pay for this course and then go through this course. And then after the course, then you pay for the publishing. And then I said, okay, here's the money for the course. And so it was me in my own way in the beginning. The advice what Alicia said, finding one of your peers who has also written a book or a few books is definitely golden advice. That's what wound up working for me. And not just finding someone that wrote a book. I found someone who wrote a book. I read their book and then said, okay, this is it. Because I found people who wrote books a couple of times, and then I would pick up the book and I didn't like the way the cover was. I didn't like, I didn't like the grammar in it. And first line, it was all these errors. So I said, okay, well, I don't want to go with whoever you used. You know, so even some self-publishers, they're like, you know, I can help you through the process. Well, if your work isn't really up to what I think I want my standards to be, then we're not going to work well together. So I finally found someone who wrote a book, and I read her book and I loved her as well as her book. And that's who I wound up connecting with, her publisher. And the one thing that I loved is there wasn't even a discussion of money in the beginning. You know, she wanted to know the reason that I wrote my book. We connected because of her passion for what I was doing. You know, her love for my book through the entire process. It was such a beautiful process for me because she was so caring and she was so patient and she understood that it was hard, you know, and she gave valuable feedback, not just put this period here and switch these words around, but it was, oh my goodness, this chapter is amazing. It's going to touch so many people's lives. You know, it was those things that I needed to hear throughout the process. And, you know, I would reach out to her, listen, I got to take a break, you know, no problem. I understand. Go ahead through your process. I'll check in on you in a couple of weeks, you know. So she was very patient with me, which was something that I definitely appreciated. And then when it came down to the price, she was able to say, this is the price breakdown. This is why it is the way that it is. This part costs this much. This part costs that much. We'll put together a payment plan. Don't worry about paying it all at one time. So that's what I loved. One of the previous people that I worked with that I tried to have publish my book, I was nickel and dime. It was, okay, give me 500 here. So I send the 500 and okay, great. Now all you got to do is edit this part. And when you send it back, send an extra 200. And I'm like, but wait, okay, how much is it? Because I, like Alicia said, I had no concept at all of how that process went. So I, you know, that blind spot for me was I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I didn't know. So I couldn't just go to Google and say, hey, Google, what's this? Because I didn't even know what question to ask. So to have that person who was passionate about her work, which led her to be passionate about the work that I was doing, was definitely key for me. And it helped me to, you know, be able to go ahead and be trusting. And also she taught me the process of self-publishing, which was awesome for me. So I knew from that point, she wasn't just there for my money. And I told her, I got a bunch of books that I'm ready to write. And she said, okay, well, I'm going to teach you how to go ahead and do this on your own too. So that was important for me as well.
Yeah, that sounds like a really beautiful.
Yeah. I wanted to add, I'm so glad that you said that, because in my end, the person who, because I didn't share that someone did help me, and they did that same thing, you know, and they said that they wanted to bless me because they knew of some things, that why things happened for me the way that they did. So they just wanted to bless me, and they showed me the ropes. So I will share with people that if you do make a decision to go with self-publishing, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't be a cheapskate. Go on ahead and pay somebody to read your proofread. Because what I did, I went on ahead and got a student. I was at the time living in what I like to call Collegeville, because all the universities are around me, A&T State University, UNC, all the universities are around. And I'm like, you know what, let me get a student that is in journaling or something and pay them to proofread. They need a couple dollars, you know, and I need this work done, because you can't see everything, you can't do everything. So if you're going to self-publish, that is great. It's nothing wrong with it. It'll turn out great. I used also a website called Fiverr. They helped me with my cover. They did my cover. I gave them the picture, gave them the concept. They sent it back. It cost me $35. And it was great, but I paid somebody to proofread for me. As I did fix my font in my book, I did find like 1 or 2 errors, but 1 or 2 errors, that's okay. But I did learn. I learned from somebody helping me, like Lynette said, that they cared and they were patient with me. and they didn't charge me. There is a cost with a publisher, but the great thing about having a publisher, if you get the one that fits well for you, is they will allow you to sit back and write. They will allow you to sit back and be creative, and they will be patient with you, but they will also be like a parent, and they'll tell you, you have such and until such and such date to get this done. Because you need a timeline. You need somebody to be strict with you, because it's easy to say, okay, I'm gonna get back to it, because you got other things going on in your life. So either way you go, a publisher, I can't give you any dollars because times have changed since both Lynette and I have written our books, and prices are different depending on who you go with. But you have to just kind of judge from there what's best for you. Yeah.
I love that. And then even with, some publishers, the publisher I went with, she had a whole big package deal versus, okay, I already came with my cover. I had this, I had that, I had certain pieces. So it was cheaper. So it's really about what it is that that you actually need. But it's so worth it. And like you said, just to reiterate, editing, do not only rely on your own eyes, because you will read straight over your own mistakes, because your brain is processing what you already said. So you'll read over what you missed. So definitely, if you do everything else yourself, that's fine, but definitely have somebody proofread your book.
Thank you both for those answers. We have a few questions from the audience and folks on the call, but the last question that I'll ask the both of you, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want people to know? And what's next for you, and where can folks find you? Lynette, we can start with you.
Things I want people to know. The way I present myself here is the way I present myself everywhere. I am me. The way that I wrote my book is me. You just get different aspects, different perspectives of me, depending on where I am. I love people. I love people. It used to be to a fault, but now I just know that that's the way that God created me. So I'm going to continue to love on people the way that I love on people. There is a quote that I love that I kind of stole from my husband. There's salvation in transparency. Our stories have the ability to not just save lives, but to lead people to salvation. So I love when people share their stories. We all have these gifts on the inside of us, but we know that a gift is not a gift until it's given. So give your gift, and don't be afraid to give that gift to someone, because that seed can help something grow in someone else. So that's what I want to say. And how you can get in contact with me, I am Lynette Trawick everywhere. So you can find me on Instagram, Lynette Trawick, Facebook, Lynette Trawick. My website is LynetteTrawick.com. You can Google Lynette Trawick. You can find Lynette. I try to make it as simple as possible. I do have my nonprofit is IMU. We are doing some rebranding this year and restructuring. So, be on the lookout for those things. And yeah, I think I answered all your questions. I think that was it that you asked. So thank you. I really appreciate this, and looking forward to more things to come. So yes, that was the other question you asked, more things to come. There will be another book coming. I'm actually planning to do a prequel to this book. So I'm very, very excited about that. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Alicia, is there anything that I didn't ask that you would like people to know? What is coming up for you that you would like to share, and how can people find you?
So what I would like you to know, don't be afraid to ask questions. Yeah, when you're writing, because I know everybody wants to write. Everybody has a story, and don't minimize your story. Don't minimize your story. Lynette's story is her story, and it's freaking phenomenal. My story is phenomenal. Your story is your story, and it's phenomenal, and somebody needs it. I would always say that if I am telling my story or my truth to 100 people and only one person hears it and receives it, that is one person that I won. that is one person whose life I was able to change. So don't minimize your truth and don't be afraid to ask questions. There is no such thing as a stupid question. Teachers tell you that all through your life, and it is real. No question is stupid, because if you have the question, somebody else has that question too, and they want to know the answer. So don't feel like because you might be able to Google my name or Lynette's name and you can't, and you Google your name and maybe you don't see a whole bunch of stuff, that don't matter. That don't matter. You're still important. You are still important. Make sure that you still ask questions. We all put our pants on the same way, one leg at a time, unless you just all that and you could just jump in them, you know, in one jump. But seriously, like, just don't be afraid to ask questions, because, you know, Lanice, I keep saying Lanice because your name is similar to somebody else. Lynette went through her writing privately, and I basically did mine as well. There was nobody that I went to and said, hey, how do I do this? I just wrote. People knew I was writing, but I didn't seek any advice until I was publishing. So in this time, because Seeds of Healing has created this platform for us, and we're not the only ones, make sure you reach out to us, to anybody else, and just ask questions. Reaching me, my name, but really I go by Healed Lee because I stand on my healing. My family calls me Lee most times, and I stand on my healing. That's one thing that once I got my diagnosis and embraced it as a part of my life, I continue to stand on my healing. So Healed Lee, you can Instagram Healed Lee, Twitter Healed Lee. That's how you find me. I don't have a website. I tried playing around with that back in the day, and I need somebody to do that for me. Like, I need somebody to do it. I'm lazy sometimes.
I'll help you.
Thank you. See, look at my sister coming through. See, you have not because you asked not. So for me, I am working on reestablishing Alicia. I'm working on reestablishing Alicia so that I can come out with a new me. That way I can share that with others and help bring up new leaders. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to move into just a few questions that folks have sent in through the chat box. But before I do, I want to remind folks once again, there's been a survey dropped in a few times. Taking just a couple minutes to fill out that survey is helpful to Seeds of Healing. One, it helps the organization know what kind of information that you would like to see, what has been effective for you and what you would like to see more of. It also helps us to communicate to our supporters what demographics we serve. And so we're able to communicate the impact that the organization has. If we have demographic information, we won't share your personal information. We just broadly want to gather demographics. Having said that, we'll move to the first question. There's a lot about second books, so people want to buy the second books and hear about the second books. Lynette, I heard you say that like your next one is going to be a prequel. Alicia, are you also planning on a second book, or I feel like you said that there were a few other books inside?
Yeah, I literally have titles already. I just need to sit down. As far as this book is concerned, this was it's about my life, and there's more, where I have grown and transitioned, transformed into someone wonderful from this. So yeah, I definitely have more in me, and I'm going to sit my tail down and write. Yes.
Beautiful.
We need to hold each other accountable with that, because I definitely just go ahead and sit and write.
I'm gonna hit you up. Oh, and that's another thing. And I know we're into this question, but that was another nugget. Get an accountability partner. Yes, get an accountability partner, because that writing, like I literally just said, I'm going to write, and I've been saying that for a long time. And I, in my notepad, have titles already of books that have been placed in my spirit and I have not written yet, but I just put it out in the atmosphere, and I don't know how many people are watching, but I put my business all out in the street, and me and Lynette gonna have to connect, and somebody else is gonna say, hey, are you writing? So get an accountability partner.
Lynette gonna call you now.
Right.
Lynette, did you want to share anything else about the prequel that you're thinking of?
Not really. I just, people have been asking me since they read the book, I need more. What else happened? What else is going on? I'm like, at first, when I first wrote the book, I said, well, I thought that was it. I wrote a book. Y'all asked me to write a book. I wrote a book. What else you want from me? But I definitely want to kind of highlight some of the things that kind of led up to why I became the person, or how I became the person that I became leading up to my diagnosis, just discussing some of those teenage and childhood traumas. I don't know exactly how far back I want to go with this one yet, but there's definitely something coming. Also, my daughter, she's 14, she'll be 15 next month. We've been talking about starting a children's series. So a chapter book series from, we have some characters in mind that we want to kind of create to help other teenage girls through some of the traumas that she's experienced as well. So yeah, there's definitely some things in the works. And another thing, I have to speak this into the atmosphere because this is something I've been saying I was going to start. So, but I am exploring the journey of becoming a writing coach. So not necessarily a publisher or an editor, but to help people through that process of writing a book before you even start looking into an editor or a publisher. So I already have a name for that coaching program and everything. So yeah, I have I spoke it once, probably about 2 months ago, and I said, okay, I need 3 people that are looking to write memoirs, and because that's something that's going to be my specific niche. So somebody that's writing about their lives, whether they write it from first person or they decide to write it in a novel form. But I want to keep it on that personal level. And when I spoke that, I said, I just need 3 people who are looking to write a book. Oh my goodness, I had about 20 that sent me messages. Oh my goodness, can you please help me? Can you please help me? So I'm like, okay, these people are now waiting on me to help them. So I got to go ahead and get it started. Yes.
Good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
The next question is, how did it feel and how did you react when you finally got to hold the finished copy of your book? Either one of you can answer that first.
Ooh, I remember, oh my goodness. So my book was just released. I did my launch for my 40th birthday. So my 40th birthday was April 8th, and I did my launch party on April 9th. I wish I could remember the date, but I remember being so nervous because first of all, I put my order for my books for my launch didn't come. So I had my launch with no books. Well, I had 1 book because I went on Amazon and I ordered my own 1 copy because I said I gotta at least touch my book before my launch. So this is the first book ever. This is the one that, I touched my book first. And I remember I called people. I was like, I got my book. Like, this is my book, y'all. And I took a picture and I was on social media like, this is my book. And still, even to say that now, it's just like, this is really my book, this is what I've been working on for so many years. And it was just, it is such an amazing experience. It is so awesome to just, when people send me messages, I've gotten, even since we've been on the phone, people that have been reaching out. I think I got 4 orders today, outside of people from this live that are like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize you wrote a book. I know you said you were writing, but I need it now. And, and people just talking about how the book has saved their lives and, helped them through things that they're going through. And I think one of the most impactful people that reached out to me, she I think she's in her 70s. And she called me and she said, wow, Lynette, your book reminded me so much of my life, and it really helped me to heal from some of the stuff that I've experienced. And I was like, but you 70 something years old, and I'm not even, I know I've been saying that my book is for everyone,
Right.
Everyone can get something from my book, but I just never thought that someone that much older than me could really receive a healing in that way, from things that they experienced in their lives. So that was definitely very touching for me. Yeah, and it just feels good. So I have my book in my hand most of the time. When I'm driving, it's in my car, and it's just in my hand because it's like, this is my baby. Like you said, you take your baby everywhere. You gotta take care of your baby. So
Yeah, thank you. How did it feel, and how did you react when you finally got to hold a finished copy of your book?
Basically the same. I took pictures. I mean, I cried, and oh my gosh, I was just so happy. Like, I did this. I finally did this, and it's in my hand, and oh my gosh, I did this. I accomplished something. For those who did read the book, I mentioned probably several times in my in some of the chapters that, here's something else that I couldn't complete, or I wasn't good at, and I was always so hard on myself. So even as an adult woman, I was like, oh my gosh, I did this. Look at my book. Oh my gosh, I got a book. I got a book. And it was just so awesome. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's celebratory. I do remember my launch date. So with my brother passing away on July 13th, 2015, he literally passed away the day I was going to read him my book. So before I published, when I finished handwriting it, I finished it on a Sunday. And I was like, okay, now I'm finally finished. I'm going to read it to T. And that next day he passed away. So I was like, you know what? He knows everything that's in it. So that day wouldn't be so sad for me, I said, you know what? I'm going to launch my book on the day of his passing. And so July 13, 2017, 2 years later, I went on ahead and did the launch, and I wanted to do my book signing on his birthday, which would have been August 30th, but it was on a weekday. So I think I chose like the week before that to do it, but I centered my book around him. That way it could be celebratory of the book, and I wouldn't be so sad about my brother not physically being with me. So every time I see my book, I think about my book. I'm just like, oh, I did that. And then when I look at it, I'm just like, wow, I've grown. I've learned so much. And like you, Lynette, I try to keep my book with me, all the time. People say, you're always supposed to keep one in the car. And, I have a new car now. And the last one had my book in it. And, I was telling somebody about the book, and they're like, you got one in the car? And I'm like, oh, it's in the other car that, got messed up in a car accident. So I'm gonna get another one. And I just got some. So it's like, now I got some more books. And, you do always keep your book with you. The first copy, like you, Lynette, have your first copy. I don't have that one in hand, only because I don't like it. I don't like it. And only because we're on this platform, I won't share why. Because it just was the bad stuff that just happened in the beginning of my publishing. So, now that I have everything in place, it's like, oh, I'm so excited. So what's this, 2022? So from 2017 to 2022, it's still new to me, y'all. It's like exciting that, I literally now have a book, and it's just time for me to come on and come up and do some more. And Lynette, I'm proud of you. Yes. Go on ahead and do that for other people, because they need that. And I won't put myself out there, even though a part of me is like, girl, you need some help, because that's just how I am. But ooh, it's like, wait, don't throw yourself out there too quick.
Well, this has been beautiful. I know we're coming close on time. I think the last question that I'll ask before handing it back over to Destiny, it says, while you were in your writing process, did you ever think about quitting? If so, what encouraged you to keep going?
Yes. Yes.
That was strong, yes.
I quit several times. Now I think about, I quit several times. What kept me going was people calling me, hey, I know you were writing a book a while ago. Did you ever finish? Like, no. But where is it? It's coming. And I remember I kept saying, I have so many versions of my bio because the bio says with a new book due to release the end of 2019, with the book due to release April of 2020, like so many different dates. And yeah, so yes, I quit several times. I think the thing that saved me was the fact that I was telling people that I was writing a book and they were anticipating the book. And then the final thing was my husband, like, you have to write this book. You got to finish this book. So yeah, it was because I said I was going to do it and people held me accountable for doing it. So
You had all them involuntary accountability partners you didn't plan for.
yeah, because I quit a bunch of times.
Yeah. Yeah, I was in the quitter's lane too. I was in the quitter's lane. I got kicked out of it. And I like to tell a joke, like I threw in the towel and then the towel jumped back on me and wrapped itself around my ankles. Like I ain't going nowhere. Like, yes, I did. And what kept me going was, like Lynette said, I put it out there in the atmosphere. So people was like, wait a minute, didn't you say you was writing a book? Your book out yet? Like, and then people start saying, where do I send the money? And I'm like, I ain't finished the book. It's like, well, let me just pay for it now. I don't even know how much it's going to be. Like, so people were anticipating, and especially because, speaking on platforms, it's like, okay, then I heard you talk. I really want to read your story because I know that what you're sharing in public, you probably going to share more in the book. And I'm just like, oh gosh, y'all don't know this is a lot of pressure. Yeah. And then, it was just still like, man, I'm not doing this. And then another thing that kept making me quit, comparison. Y'all stop comparing yourself to people. I was comparing myself because I done put myself out there. Oh, I'm writing a book. I'm at the fountain writing because I had to write by water. Water is cleansing, and that was purposeful for me. And next thing I know, somebody is like, new book launch. And I'm like, oh, they got their book out and I'm still over here writing this book. I ain't doing this. Forget it. I'm done. I'm not doing it. Alicia, didn't you say you was writing a book? Oh my gosh. So yeah, the quitter's lane be popping all the time, but it's not for us. It's not for us at all. So yeah.
Yes, that comparison thing will get you. I know people would tell me they would print, oh, I got a book. My book came out and I'm looking, I'm like, well, my cover don't look like that. Right. Like, oh man, should I put my picture on the front? Or should I put it on the back like they did? Right. And then I started grabbing books off of my shelf. Like, how many pages does this book have? Okay, I need to add more to mine. Or no. Then even when I got the book in my hand, no. I remember somebody told me the average novel should have, or the average book should have such and such amount of pages. And then when I finished, and I was so proud of my book, and I said, all right, how many pages does my book have? And she told me, and I was like, that's it. What am I supposed? She was like, what do you mean that's it? It's good. I'm like, but it's not as many pages as that book. And this person said it gotta have this many pages in it, so it's not gonna be good enough. Yeah. Then I had somebody telling me how much I should charge for my book. Mm-hmm. You should charge this amount because if it's this many pages, you should charge this much. And if it's that many pages, you should charge that much. I said, no, I got people now telling me I should charge more for the book.
Me too.
So, so that goes back to what you were saying earlier too, Alicia, when you were talking about, protect your baby. No, stick to your guns, not just with the writing, but I know my worth. I know the price of my story. Right. So my price is what my price is.
That's it.
And this is what I'm going to price it at. And that's that. Whoever's supposed to get the book is going to get the book. And then I had that same experience and I was in tears. I remember I was talking to a friend of mine about the book because she said, well, how much do you think, and this was a couple of years ago, how much do you think you would sell your book for? And I was like, I don't know, 20, 25, I guess. And she was like, oh, okay, we just standing there talking. The next thing I know, I got a cash app for $25. And she said, for your book, whenever it comes out. And I was like, that was like 2 years ago. So I just, I had to give her a big shout out when my book finally came. But yeah, it's like comparison kills. And that's with everything. Comparison kills. So your book is your book. Your story is your story. That's it.
Well, Thank you all for taking time. It's been a real pleasure. It's been a real joy on this panel and speaking with both of you. And I'll pass it over to Destiny.
Thank you, Alicia, Lynette, and Ashley, for your vulnerability, healing, time, dedication, and overall inspiration. Thank you everyone for attending the Becoming an Author and Sharing Your Journey webinar this evening. Please take a moment to fill out that survey in the chat box. If you fill it out within 24 hours of the webinar, we will send you a Kindle copy of both books. And we also encourage everyone to sign up for SOH Time and follow us on Facebook and Instagram for updates on upcoming webinars and join our mailing list for future updates. Thank you again, and everyone have a great evening.